All right, and we're live. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to The Unspoken Truth. I'm your host, Robert Russ, and I'm joined by my fabulous co-host, Ed Anderson. We're live every day here at 5:30 Sydney time and 2:30 p.m. Minnesota time. Ed, g'day, mate. Welcome to the show. How are you?
G'day, buddy. Yeah, I'm living the dream. Thanks for asking. Kind of a hot and muggy here in Minnesota here today. What's the weather? It's fall there now, right? Isn't it fall?
Yeah, it's moving into winter. It's the coldest, some of the coldest days we've had in about, I saw a stat, in 37 years. There's really sub-zero temperatures and lots of snow going on in the southern part of Australia and the highlands of Australia. But here in Sydney, it's cold. I don't know, man. Maybe it's like 10 degrees or something like that. It's really, I still go outside in shorts. It's not that bad. Every time it's cold here, I think of you in Minnesota and think, this is nothing, man. This is like it's a cold breeze for you. There's literally nothing for you.
Yeah.
I had a mate who came from Budapest, and he came in the dead of winter, and he came on the very first flight of the day, which is a British Airways flight that lands at 5 o'clock in the morning, and it lands before the curfew. And it's just the timings that came there. And he came in the dead of winter, and I said, he goes, oh, the flight lands at this time. What can I do? You know, will there be taxis? And I'm like, listen, dude, I'll just come and pick you up. It's just easier. I'll come and pick you up. I'll take you to the hotel. It's like 10, 15 minutes for me to get there, and it's another 15 minutes at that time of the day to drop you off at the hotel. And I was rugged up, man. Like I had like 2 jumpers on. I was freezing, and I get to the airport, and he's standing out the front of the airport. He's gone through customs because it only took him a minute because there's no one there. And he's standing out the front in shorts and a t-shirt, and it must have been about, I don't know, 4 degrees Celsius in Sydney. It's like the coldest winter morning we have, and he's standing there in shorts and t-shirt. He's like, morning, hello, how are you? It's just acclimatized, man. It's like nothing here for him. He's used to snow and ice.
Yeah, I know it doesn't take enjoys nice weather more than a Minnesotan. You know, that's why, as soon as it gets, 10 degrees, so I think that's around, 30 degrees Celsius.
Correct.
30,
Yeah,
30.
Right. Yeah.
At 30 degrees, yeah, our barbecues are out, man. We're getting the barbecue out. And, we're in our shorts. Yeah.
Yeah, it is absolutely good weather here. But look, we're not here to talk about the weather here on The Unspoken Truth. We're here to share the story behind the stories. If this is your first time here, folks, we're available as a podcast. So come on over and join us on Spotify, join us on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or your favorite podcasting app. You'll be able to find us over there. So make sure you come on over and check us out there. We're making some nice headway in that part of the internet, which is really good. I noticed the other day we were as high as 130 in the Australian podcasting charts, which is really good considering that there's so many podcasts out there, and we can't do that without the support of our viewers. If you're joining us here live on the channel, make sure you drop a comment in there and let us know what your thoughts are on the discussion that we've got going on today. So Ed and I have got a great report. We've got some fun things that we want to talk about as it relates to BRICS. Now, if you don't know what BRICS is, that's Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And it's now called the BRICS Plus because there's a whole lot of countries that want to join BRICS and be part of that, maybe, I don't new world monetary system. I don't want to say new world order, and it's also not new either, right? It's actually the way that the financial system should work, where it's backed by things related to the real world, i.e. gold and silver or commodities of some description like that. So I saw a funny report I'll share with you, Ed, as well, that France applied to join BRICS and they wanted to get in on the action there as well, which is kind of ironic given that they're supplying weapons to Ukraine who are attacking Russia. So, well, this is going to be part of the discussion. It's pretty interesting. I've also noticed in the last couple of days, Zelensky has been pretty active, jumping up and down in his jumpers on the red carpet, saying that the Russians have rigged the Zaporizhzhia power plant to blow. And the theory behind that is that they're going to blow the cooling pond now that there's no more water in the river, and all of the rods are going to be exposed, which is going to create a nuclear disaster. Not like blowing up one of the reactors, but destroying the actual cooling pond where all the rods are, and that'll create a nuclear catastrophe. And then you go kind of look at it and you think, well, to what end? And the end is, that's the actual point. That's the end, because the nuclear catastrophe that would create, that would force the war to stop, and the lines of where we are will stop. And that's one way that the Russians can hold the ground that they've got. But as soon as that's all fixed and squared away, then the Russians are going to have to be kicked out again and the war will kick off again. So this is one way that they may extend the war, and it's pretty uncool. Some bad news coming in just in the last hour or so, that the submarine that was missing, the Titan submarine with the Ocean Gate business, has been found, and there's been debris that's been found, and it's the rear cowling or cone, I suppose you would call it, has been found in a debris field, and the landing gear that it uses to get on and off its deployment and recovery device has also been found. So, and it's found near the actual Titanic itself. So it seems like that all is lost. They've run out of oxygen, and like we said yesterday, that's a self-fulfilling prophecy. But I'll show you some more about that as well. And of course, like normal, we've got a discussion about all of these fun things that we're going to be talking about. Ed, have you got any opening remarks before we kick it off on today's show?
Yeah, just a shout out to everyone in the Hey Ed WhatsApp group and then the Hey Ed YouTube channel, because we do a stream now on the Hey Ed YouTube channel. I do have a little favor to notice. I keep on a separate page on my other monitor. I pull up the pages of those other sites, and I'm in like a competition to see how many of my Hey Ed YouTube followers compared to Rob's channel, see how many people are actively watching. Do me a favor, because I see people coming and going, which I get it, because this is an hour-long podcast. But if you don't mind, just for the fun of it, if you have to leave, even if you have something else to do, you just let it run. Just hit the mute button to do your other stuff on the computer. The algorithm, it's all about the algorithm, right? And promoting the algorithm. So if you can, if you need to watch another video or something, or take a phone call, just hit that mute button and let us run in the background. Maybe I'm being selfish, but
yeah, I love it. It's true. One of the really difficult things about building a YouTube channel is the more you get seen, the more you get shown. But the really difficult thing is to try and cut through and to actually be seen by a bunch of people to begin with as well. And unfortunately, there's no fast way to do it on YouTube, and there is no hack. After years and years of doing this, I've discovered that there's no real fast way to grow a YouTube channel. You might get lucky and have a viral video and get a lot of followers and subscribers as a result of that. But no matter what you do, I still see that there's probably around 80% of people that are not subscribed to the channel. So if you could subscribe, that'd be really helpful as well. And it doesn't matter whose YouTube channel I look at, and I work with a bunch of different people, maybe half a dozen other people. The same analytics are true there. People are just not subscribed. They just see the content and they're like, oh, what's that? That's pretty cool. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube if you see something that you like, because the algorithm will show you more of that something, which is a really good thing. And the algorithm is very sophisticated in helping you to pass your time in doing things that you should otherwise be doing something else.
Yeah, just
drags you in the rabbit hole.
Yeah, just if you subscribe, you're not going to be on our mailing. We don't have mailing lists. We're not going to be contacting you or anything like that. So don't. If that's your fear, don't worry. We're not going to be emailing you with stuff.
Oh, thank God! I don't want to write emails every day either.
I know, right? You're welcome to email us, and we'll be happy to respond.
We'll help you. Yeah, for sure. All right, Ed, why don't we get into this this BRICS report, because there's a lot going on there in the world as it relates to this. And, I think we're moving away. Putin came out just the other day in St. Petersburg and said that we're moving away from the colonial version of finance, and we're moving away from a globalist style economy and moving towards something quite different. And I like the idea of this. I think this is a good idea. We shouldn't have to be beholden to one particular currency around the world. We should be able to exchange and settle in our own currencies, and those currencies should be backed by commodities. And that should be a good thing. Problem is, we're dealing with bad actors that are part of the BRICS. So what do you do? What are your thoughts on it all?
Yeah, bring it on. Listen, look, I'm a patriotic American, but I'm patriotic with the traditional American values, not the stuff that's going on these days. The fact of the matter is that America, we've abused the power of our dollar. We've used it as a bludgeoning tool to get our way with the rest of the world. And the rest of the world is starting to resent it, and they should. So maybe we should start picking up the clues. But the reason why is the BRICS scenario so popular? Hey, look in the mirror, Mr. Powell and the rest of you guys. Look in the mirror. Do a little reflecting on what you've done to destroy our prestige in the world. And, it's karma, So and if this is what we need in order to change the way we do business, so be it.
Well, what about what Robert F. Kennedy was saying the other day in his speech? He gave a really, and he's a bit of an awkward character. I don't know if you've noticed that. It's like he doesn't want the spotlight or want to do that, but he kind of does at the same time, and he just doesn't know how to be. Like, his body language is really quite awkward. I noticed him saying that, what do we want to be? Do we want to be a nation of peace, meaning America, or do we want to be a nation that's always at war? It's the war on drugs, it's the war on terrorism, it's the war on this, and it's the war on that. And you can't argue with his rhetoric, because he's quite right, because nobody in their right mind wants to actually feel those things or see those things. So, he's got a lot of really good things to say as it relates to that. And it's just about changing your language and about the way to engage. And before you kick off and show your report there, I just want to give some context on that and what I'm saying. When you said to me that you were going to do that this morning, I came across a graphic in Twitter, and this is what it was. So this person, the Prime Minister of Iraq, he's overseeing the signing of contracts with China to build 1,000 schools in Iraq within the framework agreement between the two governments. The Chinese side was represented by the Vice President of Power China and the Regional Director of Sinotech. So there they are. And the headline that I saw when I Googled that to confirm it, the headline was, America bombs and destroys Iraq, China rebuilds it. And I thought to myself, why do we have to bomb them in the first place? Right? The whole thing was not real. You said he had weapons of mass destruction. Saddam said he didn't have weapons of mass destruction. And then he said, we'll bring the inspectors there. The inspectors have been there all through the 1990s, and we got rid of the stuff that we had. And I'm telling you, we don't have them. Bring the inspectors back. And the inspectors didn't come back. And we just went to war with them just because. And it was nothing to do with Al-Qaeda. Saddam openly stated that he never liked those people. I don't like those, but the Saudis, I don't like them. What do I want anything to do with that? And they just didn't believe it. The whole war was based on a lie. The whole thing was concocted, and it was completely fake. And here we are on the other side of it. It really changed the way the world actually is, because from there, the extension into Afghanistan to get rid of Al-Qaeda, then that extended into Iraq, and then it extended into Syria and into Libya. Man, oh man, what a mess. And that's all based around the US dollar, unfortunately.
When you hear politicians that say that they don't want war, they want peace, and they hate war, that's a lie.
RFK lying?
Politicians and the deep state, they love wars. And these days, in the modern era, wars they have nothing to do with justice or democracy. It has nothing to do with the preservation of freedom. Every modern war going on right now is essentially a money laundering operation. That's what these are. So don't believe. No, I do believe in just wars. I do think that World War II and World War I were just wars. I think we went into those wars for justified reasons to end the spread of Nazism. I think those were justified. But ever since, I don't know, probably Vietnam on, the wars are pretty hard to justify.
Well, what about Russia invading Ukraine? Is that a justified war?
That's not a justified war. We should not be in there. And let's remember. So let's remind the audience, as far as I'm concerned, this is not a war between Ukraine and Russia. This is a proxy war between America and Russia. Ukraine is just used as a proxy. We revealed here that over a year ago, there was a peace agreement on the table, and it was initialed, wasn't quite signed, but it was initialed, it was agreed to. Then America and Britain stuck its nose in and put the kibosh on that peace agreement. So we should be at peace right now in that part of the country. I think America has no vested interest in what's going on in Ukraine. And I'm going to save the rest of that commentary during our discussion when we start talking about Zaporizhzhia and the results. I've got a very strong opinion about what's going on there. That'll kind of accentuate my point. But okay, so
all right, let's take a look at your report.
All right. Okay, so if you are veterans to either the Unspoken Truth or the Hey Ed YouTube channel, you have heard us talk an awful lot about the pending shakeup in the world monetary system and the role that the BRICS coalition plays in that. But I want to emphasize an upcoming event that could be the starting point of this new shakeup. So let's talk about it.
I got a bad feeling about this.
Okay, so remind you what the term BRICS means. BRICS is an acronym, BRICS, which stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Now, this coalition really consists of much more than those countries now. So now we refer to it as BRICS Plus. But to keep things simple, I will always just refer to this coalition as the BRICS coalition, okay? But just to remind you what this is a coalition of countries who are joining forces to provide an alternative to the U.S. petrodollar. So the U.S. dollar is still considered the world's reserve currency, but that has diminished quite a bit over just the past couple of years. And the monetary policies that the U.S. has pursued over the last couple of decades has been very detrimental to the power of the U.S. dollar. So what is this upcoming event that could accelerate the introduction of an alternative monetary system, an alternative to the US dollar? Well, for that, I want to turn to an article out of Zero Hedge today that does a good job of explaining this. So let's take a look at that article. Okay, the biggest monetary shock in 52 years. I recently revealed that the so-called BRICS countries will announce the creation of a new currency at its annual Leaders Summit conference on August 22nd to the 24th. This will be the biggest upheaval in international finance since 1971, and is taking direct aim at the US dollar. It appears likely that the new BRICS Plus currency will be linked to a weight of gold. This plays to the strengths of BRICS members Russia and China. These countries are the two largest gold producers in the world and are ranked 6th and 7th, respectively, among the 100 nations with gold reserves. Okay, so what he's talking about here is the prospect that this new currency that these BRICS coalition are trying to develop will be backed by gold, which means it will be the only currency in the world that's backed by an actual commodity. Remember, the US dollar, there are no fiat currencies in the world that are backed by anything right now. The US dollar is not backed by anything. It is literally just pieces of paper. But let's go back to the article, because this is the point that I really want you to take out of this whole discussion. One difficulty in the impact of the new BRICS currency on the dollar is that all dollar indexes compare currency to currency, but that's meaningless since the dollar, euro, and sterling could all suffer from a loss of confidence at the same time. Now, this is really what I want you to pay attention to. If gold goes from $2,000 to $10,000 per ounce, that is better understood as an 80% devaluation of the dollar from 0.0005 ounces per dollar to 0.0001 ounces per dollar. That's a cost, but you'll miss it if you're looking at euros or yen. Those currencies will all be collapsing at the same time. The only objective metric for dollar strength is the dollar price of gold by weight, since gold is not a central bank currency. This resolves any valuation conundrum as follows. Number one, dollar strength can only be properly measured in gold. Gold is money, but it is also a commodity. BRICS are dollar poor, but commodity rich. Number four, a new BRICS Plus currency will be linked to gold. So the collapse of the dollar really means higher inflation and a much higher dollar price for gold. That means other commodity prices will also rise in lockstep. A commodity boom favors BRICS, generally speaking. This dynamic could lead the BRICS Plus currency to displace the dollar as a dominant payment currency more quickly than most expect because of the link to gold. Okay, so to respect your time, let's cut to the chase here, okay? The steps that the BRICS coalition are taking is going to be a direct assault, a direct attack on the US dollar and other major world currencies, like the British pound and the Japanese yen, etc. The West is a debt-based monetary system. The East, Russia, China, basically the BRICS nations, they are commodity-based economies. The upshot of all this is that the US dollar is at risk. Now, I know that I've been talking about this for a while now. Those people who are veterans to my Hey Ed YouTube channel know that I've been talking about this ever since I started my channel. And sometimes along the way, they say, Ed, your prediction hasn't come true. Well, listen, events like this take time. It is like trying to turn a battleship or carrier, okay? It takes a while for it to happen. But the BRICS Plus coalition, they've been laying the groundwork now for years. And now they're fast approaching the final piece of the puzzle. And that is linking their new currency to an actual commodity, gold, or something else. It might be a basket of commodities as far as we know. Now, this upcoming meeting in late August, they might announce the actual construction of this new alternative currency. We don't know yet, okay? But whether the specifics are actually announced in this upcoming meeting or it takes a little bit longer, the long knives are out for the US dollar. So you do not want to wake up one day and be surprised by this. You want to plan for it. There's a reason why we have the mantra that we do at the Unspoken Truth and on the Hey Ed YouTube channel. Reduce your exposure to your bank, buy some gold and silver, and establish streams of passive recurring income. You need to get prepared. You don't want to be a victim of this. If gold, silver, and other precious commodities start to go up dramatically, we could see hyperinflation here in America. And we could see an actual depression coming our way. So listen, please take the warning that Rob Bruss and I are giving you to heart. Be prepared. If you haven't subscribed to this channel, make sure you subscribe and stay up to date. We're going to tell you the unspoken truth. And if you don't mind, could you please give all of our videos a like, because it does help the algorithm? And in the comment section below, let us know what you're doing to prepare for this possible hyperinflationary event. Have you done anything to reduce your exposure to your bank, buy some gold and silver, and establish streams of passive recurring income? And I mean, if you haven't done anything, if you want, we could set up a one-on-one Zoom call if you want. Just shoot us a message. All the contact information will be in the description below. So that's my little alert for the day. Hope that helps.
Again, you nailed it. Such a complicated subject and very, very hard to understand because it encompasses so many things: geopolitics, then finance, then economies, depressions, inflation, all of those things. I was just trying to think of an analogy to help people to understand all of this stuff a little bit better. And for some reason, I'll just share my screen before we go to the discussion here. For some reason, I remembered a time when I was in a place in the world called Kuwait. We've all heard of Kuwait. We all know where that is. And I remember going to Kuwait and swapping some Australian dollars as, warship pulls alongside in Kuwait. It's all like destroyed and blown up and shot up and stuff and been rebuilt. And it's like, okay, what's in Kuwait? Oh, there's a shopping center. There's an ice skating ring in the desert. That's pretty cool. Let's go there and go ice skating. And there's a series of things that we went and did as a bunch of young sailors. But of course, you need local currency. And I remember swapping $100 and getting next to nothing back. And in today's exchange rate, if I swap $100, I get 20 Kuwaiti dinar like that. And it just doesn't seem like a very large amount of money. And I swapped $100, I worked hard for my $100, and now I've only got 20 dinar. And you're telling me that a can of Coke costs 1 dinar? Like what? That's like $5, isn't it? $4 or $5. And I've only got $20, like what? And that's when a currency hasn't been devalued, because the Kuwaitis hadn't, at the time when I was there, they didn't have to devalue their currency because it's based behind a commodity, and the commodity being oil, of course. So it's a very hard thing to understand when you, because what I'm trying to do here, Ed, and help me here, I'm trying to extrapolate where we're going to be. So fast forward like 2 years into the future, and this basket of currencies has come to pass, and they're all just their local currencies. It's still Russian rubles, it's Indian rupees, it's Chinese yuan, it's Brazilian, whatever. What do Brazilians have?
Real,
something like that. Yeah, whatever their denominations are, right? It'll still be their currencies, but the value of their currencies will be considerably less. If I want to swap $100 for some Russian rubles, I'm going to get what feels like that's a bad example, because the Russian rubles, 200,000 Russian rubles is not much. It's like 20 or $30 or something like that. So they had massive inflation problems in the 1990s under Yeltsin, which caused all of those issues in the money printing to let their currency run away like that. But if they can arrest all of that and bring it all back and kind of press the reset button on it, it's going to be a very, very interesting time in history, man. That's actually how the world's economy should work.
Yeah, the idea of resetting currencies is not new. That kind of thing happens all the time. but that process of resetting the values of the, repegging the currency to something is a very painful process.
That's because everyone has to agree, right?
That's right. That's right. And one of the reasons why, listen, when people ask me, well, why don't we just go back to gold? Well, two reasons. One, that process will be extremely painful. We will go through a severe economic crisis in order to establish that new peg. But more importantly, the politicians don't like any kind of restrictions on what they can spend their money on. That's why
it's got nothing to do with the financial pain it creates. It takes away all of their freedom to actually do whatever they want.
That's right. That's what it's all about. The politicians. That's why we went off the gold standard, so the politicians will not be constrained anymore. They can spend whatever they want. There's no limit. Politicians love that, and evidence of that we've seen over the past just like 2 years. The money printing is just insane. I don't know. Insane is too kind of a word. I don't know what you call it. So but they are printing our dollars into oblivion. It's unsustainable. So now.
So I saw a comment in one of our videos recently saying that, hey, so I just want to, and I'm not picking on anybody in particular. I just want to highlight this to make sure people really understand it, because the comment highlighted to me that they didn't understand the actual concept of printing money or inflation. And the only thing that creates inflation, folks, is the government printing too much money, whether that's physical dollars, meaning the paper currency that you have in your hand, or it's digital money. It doesn't really matter. And the person commented and said that, look, the currency wasn't printed. Nobody was printing money. It's all electronic. So it's not true. They're essentially saying that. The reality is it doesn't matter if it's electronic in your bank account or in somebody else's bank account or the Federal Reserve's bank account, or it's physical dollars like cash in a bag. It doesn't matter. The same principle is true. And not a lot of people understand what you mean by commodities-backed currencies. When you think of the process of digging gold out of the ground, just close your eyes for a second and imagine what a gold mine looks like. You see big, heavy mining equipment, big diggers, and then you see processing facilities. They've got to sift through all of that dirt to find the gold. And then think about the geologist with his hand on his chin, reading the chart and trying to make a decision about all of this. And then they go to the stock market to raise money because they're going to explore, and then they've got to break ground, and all just the complex process that it actually is. It takes a huge amount of effort, time, and money to dig the gold out of the ground, and there's only a limited amount of it. And that's why if you use your currency that is backed by gold, then it's not just backed by a promise, because the currency at the moment is backed by a promise. And in 1934, when the US government outlawed individuals having gold, they collected everybody's gold, put it in a vault, then suddenly said the gold price is now more than what it was a week ago. And suddenly the US government had more money. And in 1971, when Richard Nixon pulled everybody off the gold standard, the currency was backed by all of that gold that was collected from the population in the 1930s. But now the government had no more ability to print any more money, because the money that they printed wouldn't be backed by the gold that was in the vault, because there wasn't enough of it. So people don't understand that it takes so much effort to pull the gold out of the ground and put it in a vault and then say, okay, now I'm going to print that amount of money, and that's the only amount of money that's in society. So it stops inflation. It stops things going up and down. And I really liked how that reporter in the Zero Hedge article that said the currency will be backed by a weight of gold. He didn't say the specific amount. He didn't say a kilo or an ounce or a 400-ounce bar or something like that. He said a weight of gold. And then further down the article, he really said, if $1 was 0.5 and then it went up and then 0.1, that's an 80. You can't see that with a normal currency. So many benefits that are going on there like that. Australia should be part of that. Australia is the world's quarry. We have all of the minerals in the ground here. We have all of the iron ore, all of the coal, all of the uranium, massive gold deposits as well, huge amounts of all of that. We would be an economic powerhouse if we got on board with all of that.
Yeah, well, my guess is that your politicians have the same interest in keeping it off a commodity-based standard as American politicians.
How do we play in both camps?
What's that?
How do we have a foot in both camps, right? Because even if this comes to pass, so this BRICS plus thing comes to pass and they create a new basket of currencies, countries around the world that are in BRICS are still going to trade with countries that are not in BRICS. So, for example, we're still trading with China. and China is still trading with us. So if their currency is suddenly backed by gold, or they're settling in a different way, or something else is happening, how do we have it? We're going to have a foot in both camps. And I think eventually we'll be pulled towards something like that because of the value of our commodities here. And it might change the way that the mining industry here is regulated in Australia, because the Australian government regulates that heavily. And, the tax revenue that the Australian government gets, the vast majority of that is just from a handful of companies. And if that goes away for some reason, for whatever reason, there was no more demand, or there was some other, miracle invention that was created where we no longer needed those commodities, we would be flat broke. We'd turn into a banana republic overnight because there'd be no more tax revenue. So when I look at this, it's kind of like, well, if this is the world's changing, how come the Australian government is not talking about this? If they're creating commodities-backed currencies, why aren't we grabbing the coattails of that, irrespective of the enemy out there? It goes to the very heart of that little tweet that I showed you, where that Chinese guy is in Iraq building 1,000 schools. Why isn't that in mainstream media, man? That's like an incredible thing. Imagine if someone came to America and said, I want to build 1,000 schools. I've got $10 billion that I've acquired over my lifetime, and I want to give it back to the country. I want to build 1,000 schools. Crazy, man.
Well, remember, the media is in on it, remember.
Yeah.
Right? So the media had this marching orders. So so when you wonder why the media isn't covering this or isn't covering that, it's because it doesn't fit the agenda. It doesn't.
You're ruining my rose-colored glasses and my beautiful view of the world, man. You're calling me a Boy Scout all the time. I want the world to be a better place.
Oh, poor little Robbie. Grow up, man. Grow up. Time to grow up.
Evil freaking government, man, ruining everything.
That's right. The government, listen, a lot of people say that would argue that the Federal Reserve and the other big Western countries have printed our currency into oblivion because they're incompetent. Well, maybe, but there's just as good a case to make that it's by design. And that's the camp that I fall in. I think they're perfectly happy to destroy, the Federal Reserve is one of their jobs is supposed to be to defend our currency, right? That's supposed to be one of their jobs. Well, the Federal Reserve and there are plenty of central banks around the world who've been buying gold the past couple of years like it's going out of style. They cannot buy it fast enough. And each one of these central reserve banks, their jobs is to defend their particular currencies. So what does it say to you when those people who are supposed to be defending their currencies are out there buying a ton of gold? Okay, so you gotta look at what they do, not what they say.
When you think about it, it's actually all they need to do is to get a consensus. And this BRICS thing has been around for some time. And if they just build an alternative financial system to SWIFT and using and deciding what the currencies are, and no country wants to let go of its currency. No one, if the USD loses its world dominance, the next thing in line is the euro. But no one wants the euro to be the world's reserve currency, probably not even the Europeans, right? So the consensus among BRICS is you guys keep your currencies. You keep them. They're okay. We're going to trade through this system that is not SWIFT, and we can settle in our own currencies. And if you've got 150 tons worth of gold in there, I've got 150 tons worth of gold in my vault. So these things like this. So then the trading system is just a ledger. So now Russia has got 150 tons, China has got 150 tons. They buy and sell between each other, and 1 ton needs to go from China to Russia. So in the Russian vault, they just move 1 ton of gold across the floor like this, but they just do it on an entry in a computer. It's just a ledger is all it is. That's how it worked in Fort Knox. And that's the reason why they had to get rid of the gold peg, is because there was not enough gold to move around inside the vaults anymore. It's just ridiculous, but that's what we're going back to. And the countries that have all of the gold are going to have all of the purchasing power. That's the difference.
Okay, remind me to make a comment on Fort Knox here, but before this, so in case I forget, make sure you remind me. We are used to, most people, they kind of gauge the power, the strength of the U.S. dollar by comparing it to others, right? You always have these pairs in the Forex world, right?
Yeah.
The U.S. dollar versus the British pound versus the yen versus, and that's how we kind of measure the strength of our currencies. And what he's pointing out there in that article is that's the wrong way to look at it, because in the event of a global inflationary cycle, they're all going to go down in value. The true measurement is in relationship to gold, because gold, in addition to being actual money, it's a commodity, and it's something that you can quantify. Okay, this is an ounce of gold. That's what it is. It's an ounce of gold.
What about so the idea of gold, that is just a benchmark, because everyone agrees on that.
Yeah.
And it could never really be oil. It might be silver, it could be platinum or palladium or something like that, but gold is the benchmark for all of that. But what about countries like, you mentioned Japan and the yen? Japan don't produce gold. They don't have any gold. But Japan are one of the world's largest producer of consumer goods. So then it falls on the Japanese government to make sure that their system works in a way that the government is taking the profits of what they're getting from tax and whatever they're selling and putting that back into gold to building their wealth that way. Yeah. So that's why this is such a big thing, right? Is because it can undo the entire world's economy.
Well, the idea behind what the BRICS coalition is trying to achieve is, and they got a little work to do, and I don't know how far along they are it's kind of a complicated topic, because it seems to me what they're going to have to do is come up with some kind of an agreement between them saying, okay, between us, we're going to have X amount of gold, X amount of silver, X amount of platinum. Now, whether all of it is in Russia or China, or they divvy it up and they house it, and they're responsible for they want like a static number, something that's a reliable fixed number, so that they can peg their each one of their individual currencies to, right?
Well, that's what Fort Knox was, right, back in the day.
Okay, and regarding Fort Knox has not been audited, by the way, in decades.
No way, I didn't know that.
Yeah, we do not actually know whether there's any gold in Fort Knox.
Well, this is the problem right here, right? I'm basing the whole premise of that $20 bill in your wallet that you hand over to me for lunch to be backed by the government and a promise. But then the government, the government is full of shit, man, and I can't promise you that there's $20 worth of gold in the vault there, literally.
That's right. Even if they did let the auditors in and they found the gold. Question is, who really owns the gold? How much of that have we sold to other people and we're just holding on to it for them?
That's part of the reason that they say that the gold price is so down, isn't it? And there's too much paper gold in the world. That's the reason the gold price is suppressed. Gold should be like $25,000 an ounce, man, but it's not, because
well, you could argue it should be worth $1 million an ounce.
It's artificially suppressed.
Boy, that's a topic for a whole nother, discussion. The idea, the corruption and the depression that's going on in the precious metals market, particularly gold and silver. Silver is even worse. And there are players. I mean, who was it? It was Goldman. No, not Goldman. It was J.P. Morgan, who gets fined on a regular basis for manipulating the silver market. And it's like every year they've got to pay, I don't know, like $100 million in fines for illicit activity in the silver manipulation market. Nobody ever goes to jail. It's just like a cost of doing business. Okay, every year they set aside $100 million to pay the fines or whatever, and it's one big scam. But it is like the worst kept con, secret in the world.
Finance.
Everybody knows about it, so everybody knows they're doing it. And the crooks know that everyone knows they're doing it, but they keep doing it.
Coming back to your Fort Knox example and the con and that scam. So these BRICS countries are getting together, doing that, saying they're going to figure out what the consensus is, and how much is it all in Russia? Is it all in China? Is it do you have your own in your own vault, and we have ours in ours?
And I think what they will do exactly what we should be doing, and we always preach to the world to do, transparency, right? My guess is they will invite international auditors in to take a look at the vaults and they'll purposely make it transparent, and it's going to make the West look like fools. It's going to make us look like real children. So
imagine being so hopeless you can't manage money, but you can print as much as you want, and they still can't get it right. This is
the con, right? And this is modern monetary theory that liberals love.
Yep.
Yeah, what's the matter? What's the deal? We'll just print more. What could go wrong?
And you still can't get it right. And you have an unlimited amount to print, and you have an unlimited amount to write off the debt as well, and you still keep buggering it up. And that's because these people in charge don't understand second and third and fifth order effects of the decisions that they make.
And I'll tell you another thing is really going to make people's heads explode. So the Federal Reserve the past couple of years, they've been buying lots of gold too. Not as much as other countries, but they've been buying lots. So how do they buy their gold? What do they buy it with?
Yeah,
they print the money. They pull it out of thin air, and then they go buy gold with it.
They don't print the money. They just use one of these things to do it.
I'm gonna print up some money right now here, Rob. Let's see. I owe you 100.
Yeah, literally. Well, that's what a piece of paper is. So I want to close out this segment here by reminding people that it's not actually BRICS. It's BRICS. It's an acronym I coined on my name. So Brasilia, Russia, Ukraine, South Africa, India, China, and there's probably half a dozen other countries out there. I'm going to pull those countries out, pull the first letter out, and I'm going to make an acronym with it. I'll give it to ChatGPT because it's really smart to do that. But all jokes aside, ladies and gentlemen, when I look at BRICS and I look at BRICS Plus, I can see a series of other countries that want to be part of it as well. So here's one from RT, from Russia Today, where Macron wants to join the BRICS summit in Paris. French Foreign Minister Catherine Colonna has confirmed her president's intention to attend a bloc summit for the first time. I look at all of these things and I think, what's going on with the world, man? I see all that, and then I see in the next couple of weeks, the Australian government here in Australia, here in Sydney, in fact, they're going to hold a Quad meeting. So, the Quad is against China and trying to contain China. But then we have this BRICS thing going on, which is the opposite of the Quad. And I'm like, man, something fundamentally not right with our modern system, where we're continuously fighting each other and threatening each other, and everyone's rattling a saber wanting to stab somebody, but then we're trying to make the world a better place with a better economics. Like, it's very confusing, man, all of these things going on. And if we're going to build a coalition to contain China, why are we even actually trading with China? That's because the Australian government is stuck on the teat of China, and it can't get off it because of the tax revenue that it gets from it. And the reality is, I'm going to put my hand up and say it here. I'll die on this hill because it's the truth. It's the unspoken truth. Part of the reason the Chinese military is so dangerous and has got to the point that it's at is because of Australia. Because we've sold them so much coal and so much iron ore, and they've built their military and they've built their navy on the commodities that we've given to them. There's simply no better enemy than the Chinese or the Russians. The Russians are maybe a little bit of a better enemy because they can afford to buy more. But the Australian government is completely responsible for the growth and the rise of the Chinese Navy, because you just can't. They couldn't have built their Navy any other way. They need the steel to actually do that, so they use our iron ore. They need the coal to actually burn the iron ore to turn it into steel. But the Australian government failed to recognise that 15 years ago, that, hey, if we're selling this stuff to them, what are they actually doing with it? People just shrug their shoulders and goes, who cares? Look how much money we're making. They're going to build their cities. Look at all these ghost cities that they've built. That's also built on Australian steel and gold. But it's not our steel because we don't manufacture steel. We're just offloading the iron ore. And the reason that we're offloading the iron ore and not the steel is because we don't have the energy to actually make it economical to do it here in Australia. So we offload the iron ore to Japan or to China. They smelt it into steel and sell it back to us for our what? There's something fundamentally wrong. Maybe all of the green energy projects that we have will go a long way to processing our commodities onshore, because the cost of energy comes down, so we don't have to offload it, so we can move the prices. That's the utopian green dream. That's what they're saying. It's crazy.
Boy, back to the Boy Scout handbook. Listen,
hey, I'm turning into a greenie. Cut it out.
Alternative green energy is not cheap. It's the most expensive energy in the world. It doesn't save you any money. It's oh boy, did you rip a Band-Aid off there? Listen, I will see your Australian.
I'll raise you.
Yeah, that's right. I'll see your Australian commodity contribution to the Chinese, society, and I will raise you the America's intellectual property that we've handed over to China over the past 40 years. If an American company wants to go over to China and take advantage of their cheap labor, Russia says, "Sure, come on in. Just bring your blueprints with you."
And the commissar here will make sure that all of that goes onto the right server.
We'll
make sure that it's right.
That's right.
They certainly didn't build their military and their air force off the back of their own brain power, although they're really smart and they produce a lot of really good things. They definitely didn't do that. I remember it was in the early 2000s, I remember seeing the rise of the Chinese Air Force and thinking that the Chinese were building an air force that would outmatch us. And would they ever be a direct threat to Australia? The short answer was always a no, because they could never project the power, because they never had the Navy, the blue water Navy capability to actually threaten the Australian mainland. But their Air Force could. And what they were doing is they were building the islands in the South China Sea. So they could launch from mainland China, refuel in the South China Sea, and then make it all the way to Jakarta. And once they made it to Jakarta, now we can reach northwestern Australia and strike northwestern Australia. But I don't know what you're going to blow up there. There's like half a dozen things there, and in the first couple of airstrikes, it's all gone. Now what? Good luck.
Okay.
It's such a big place. You just can't get there. And even if you could take the ground in northwestern Australia and bring your Navy in to bring your logistics and supplies in, we would stop you from doing that. But at that time, they were buying Su-27 fighter jets from Sukhoi in Russia. And then they were like, okay, we need Su-30s, the upgraded version, not the third generation. We need 4.5 gen fighter jets to go up against Western air forces. And the Russians are like, no worries, here you go. We'll give it to you. And you can build them under license in China. And the Chinese, what they did is they got the first couple of jets off the Russians and they reverse engineered them. And they built their own production line based on reverse engineering those fighter jets. And then they went back to the Russians and they shit-canned the contract and went, we don't want this contract anymore. And the Russians are like, what? What are you talking about? Why not? We've been supplying you stuff for ages. You want these jets? We're giving you why don't you want them? And then it came out a couple of, I think it was about a year later, don't quote me there, it was about a year later, that the Chinese had reverse engineered it and the Russians were like, oh, that's it. Fuck you. We're not giving you anything else anymore. But the Chinese made a fundamental mistake. So they could reverse engineer the tooling to actually build the aeroplane, but they couldn't build the engines. And their Air Force has suffered ever since that had actually happened. And it was only, in the last really 10 years that they've built their own indigenous aircraft where they've got engine technology that's starting to come near where our stuff is. But they haven't developed that themselves. They've stolen all of those plans from the Americans. And, it's a well-known fact that they stole the plans for the F-35. And if you look at their version of the stealth fighter, it looks very similar. There are a couple of versions of stealth fighters, one that looks like a hybrid F-22 and one that looks like a little F-35, a little version of that. So they've taken that, modified it, and improved it to their specs based on what they can build. So, for all of that, it's crazy.
This is where we give real, true value added to our audience. This segment started as a topic on the BRICS coalition, and we got all the way to the Chinese military reverse engineering jets.
Well, the Chinese military only exists because of the Australian government selling them iron ore. That's the reality. Imagine if I stood up in a press conference and I said, Prime Minister, you, Anthony Albanese, you've been in government for a long time. You used to be the infrastructure minister back in the Kevin Rudd days, and you've been in Parliament for a long time. So you were part of the mining boom in the noughties and in the 2010s. You were part of all of this, writing policy, being in opposition. You were part of. So why aren't you taking responsibility for the Chinese threatening Taiwan now? Oh, well, I won't take responsibility for that. That's not my fault. We give them the commodities. What they do with their iron ore is up to them. Well, maybe if we actually processed it here on shore and made it more expensive for them, there would be no way that they could actually have done that. We're responsible for it. The Australian government is responsible for the Chinese military and their Navy.
All right. So even though a person listening to this podcast might think this is like a Marcel Proust stream of consciousness kind of discussion, But actually, we do tie everything together. There is a progression to everything, and that just kind of emphasizes how interconnected these subject matter are. They don't all live in isolation, and we do try to, take the discussion wherever it leads us, and draw the lines that most people don't see. This podcast, that's what we call the podcast, The Unspoken Truth. We bring to light, relationships that other people might not consider. And if you listen to this entire segment from beginning to end, and there is a through line that how these things are connected.
What do you think it's going to end up as, Ed? Do you think this meeting is going to yield actionable decisions that these BRICS nations are going to be deploying, or do you think we're still another 2 or 3 years away from this basket of currencies? That term, basket of currencies, like most people hear that and they go, I think of it like a shopping basket when I go to the shops. Like, what are you talking about? Like, do you think that this is actually coming to life now?
Yeah, I think we're on the precipice here. Now, we've been saying this for about a year now. We've been kind of anticipating that they're going to come up with a basket. The speculation runs from everything to gold all by itself, to a combination of gold and silver, to gold, silver, oil, wheat, a true basket. We just don't know. And I don't know if they know. I think they might still be in the negotiation. Look, when they got a lot of countries right now signing up for this agreement. So it can get kind of complicated. There's probably a lot of negotiating going back and forth, because whatever basket or whatever vehicle they do settle on, they want it to be perennial, right? So they want to get it right in the beginning. And if that means they got to take their time to do it, I think they're willing to do it. And none of these countries are particularly interested in being the world's reserve currency. They're not particularly interested in replacing the dollar as that status. They just want to be able to conduct business outside of the U.S. dollar, right?
Yeah, they want to be able to settle in their own currencies.
Yeah. So that's a big. Now, one of them probably will end up being just by default, the world reserve currency. But I don't think that'll be the design of it. So this August, if I was a betting man, I'd put it at probably like 40% that they will come up with it. Just because I think, this is such a big project, I wouldn't be surprised if they need another meeting to sort it out. Maybe because I'm sure there's a lot of negotiating going on behind the scenes that no one ever sees, right? And when they get together for these, I don't think anything really happens at these meetings in terms of making decisions. I think they make their decision before they get there. These are just kind of like press release events, right? So chances are by the time the meeting actually happens, there'll probably be some leaks about what they're actually going to say. So I think there's a 40% probability that they'll come up with an actual framework. I think, and with each subsequent meeting, that likelihood goes higher. And I do want to point out that we here on the Unspoken Truth, we are on the record, or at least I am. I don't know about you, I don't know whether you come around to this yet, of predicting that Ukraine will be joining BRICS. And Rob and I are really,
I coined the acronym. It's basically
I know
my
you
name.
did. Okay, that's right. That's right. So you are aboard. Okay, so that is an official prediction of the Unspoken Truth. As far as I know, I haven't heard anybody else making that prediction. So we are,
Well, I think it's, to that point, all jokes aside, I think at some point, everybody's going to have to get on board with that. And we're going to end up in a two-tier system. One that uses USD to settle. If I'm a country and I want to buy an airliner from Boeing, I'm still going to have to settle in US dollars because I'm trading with the United States. And if I want to buy a commodity from China or from some other country around the world, I'm going to have to settle in those currencies because that's the way that they do business. So I think there's no avoiding that. There is one ace in the hole there that the World Bank still has, and in the International Monetary Fund. I saw a report yesterday that they're about to roll out a central bank digital currency that works for everybody across the world. And I think even if they did do that and BRICS have got their own thing going on over here, there's got to be a way to integrate all of these things. And to your point, Ed, I think it's a very complicated issue, and it's not something that's going to be solved in the next 12 or 18 months. It's something that's progressing and is an ongoing process of progression and solutions that roll out like that.
It's going to be a very interesting topic. I think for most people, this is very boring as hell. This is like watching paint dry, the idea,
But it's the foundation of our society.
That's right.
It's how our society works. That's why it's so important.
That's right. So all we want to do here is provide you some context so that you can make some decisions that will help protect you, that will preserve your wealth, and maybe even prosper in it. That's the whole idea.
Just buy some gold and silver.
That's the simplest thing, right? That's the easiest thing to do. Get gold and silver, and you can't get more simple than that. Just buy it, and if you need a place, if you want to know how to do it, reach out to us, and we can hook you up.
Absolutely. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's take a little bit of a break, and we'll be right back. In this crazy, uncertain world, we all need a way to protect and insulate ourselves from the outside forces that we simply cannot control. I'm a news junkie, and after a lifetime of constantly immersing myself in the darkness and the despair that engulfs the world, the path to shield myself and my family has become crystal clear. I want to invite you to come and join me in the Unspoken Truth community, where I'll show you how I protect my family from this crazy world. You'll get access to 3 masterclasses worth over $1,000, as well as our live events, training, and community of truthers just like you. Come on over to the unspokentruth.com.au and join us for just 50 cents a day. What are you waiting for? Get started now at the unspokentruth.com.au. All right, I want to kick off with a bit of bad news here. The submarine, it seems that in the last hour or so, as I mentioned at the top of the show, has been found. So it's said that the tail cone here, so the pointy bit on the end, which contains all the electronics and all the guts of the sub there to make it work, has been found on the bottom, and so has the frame. So the metal frame that you can see there that it sits on, like the legs of the thing, that's been found as a debris field next to where the Titanic actually is. So it seems like those folks have run out of time, and there was no chance that they were going to be recovered either. I saw the Coasties yesterday at a press conference saying that they were pulling out all the stops. They were bringing the world's best equipment. They had some rovers there that if they found the thing, that they would be able to go down there and maybe lift it up and there were some things that they could actually do to get it back. So it sounded like they had a really good plan. But part of the issue was that it was going to take them 2.5 to 3 hours to get down there and then to get back up as well. And they were going to run out of air in the process. So unfortunately, that submarine is gone and those people have perished. And unfortunately, none of this has amounted to anything that's been positive at all. It's an absolute tragedy that that's happened. It should never have happened because it was a self-fulfilling prophecy of idiocy. And in some way, I don't know, am I reaching here, Ed, saying that it's a bit woke, where this guy claimed he wouldn't employ a 50-year-old white man that had been in the Navy and worked on submarines because he'd rather employ smart university students? Is that woke, or is that just a way of thinking? I don't know.
Well, I hadn't thought about that. I suppose that's one way to look at it. I mean, was he only hiring transgender engineers?
Well, he wasn't hiring white 50-year-old men that knew what they were talking about. That's for sure. Yeah, because he said that. He stated that publicly.
Yeah. Well, I think that's more of arrogance. A guy who thinks that the older generation doesn't understand the new technology or something like that. I don't know.
Seems like when mathematics really makes woke equals dead people.
Look, there are some industries where you just want the best damn guy, right?
Or girl, or trans person, or Martian. I don't give a shit. I want the best person that can do the mathematics that won't bugger it up and get me killed.
Exactly right. I mean, if he purposely excluded some, that's ageism, right? That's what that is. It's ageism. Yeah. And in America, it's illegal. I mean, if he publicly states, "I'm not going to hire you if you're over this age," okay, that is illegal. If you're going to do that kind of stuff, keep it to your fucking self. You don't.
Why would you go out there publicly and say that, right?
What's the point? I mean, what kind of points was he trying to score by making that statement? Who is he going to impress? With that,
I don't know. He's dead
statement?
Now. Doesn't matter. We'll never find out.
I think my comments yesterday, I might have been a little bit harsh because when you think about it, can you imagine the horror that these people must have been experiencing? When the thing is caving in? Who knows? We'll probably never know what actually happened, right? Did it implode because of the pressure? We'll probably never know. But you would. I mean, I would guess that there was probably a period there where they knew their lives were going to end, and it's kind of like being buried alive, right? You can imagine you're in the hole. You're not getting out. It's pitch black. No, I mean, I can't think of worse mental torture when you know you're going to die, and it's imminent, and you got time. You have time to think about it. I would have to assume the best way to die is instantly. Like being blown up by a bomb. That'd probably be a fairly good way, because boom, it's over.
Well, that's why it's such a tragedy, right? Is because
Yeah.
you think about what's happened to these people and what makes it worse. It's not the fact that these people perished. People die in accidents all the time. It's the circumstance in which it happens, and it's traumatic, right? It's traumatic because they were down there. It happened. They bolted themselves inside of this little device to try and go and have some fun and be explorers, and the whole pretense of what they're doing is actually really good. But it's an absolute tragedy that it happened like that. And hopefully there's some, to your point you mentioned yesterday, Ed, you're saying that maybe there should be some rules around that. If you're going to go and play stupid games, something goes wrong, it doesn't mean that we're going to come and spend $30 million to try and rescue you. That's ridiculous. We shouldn't have to do that. We shouldn't have to put other people at risk to help you achieve some ungodly, unachievable thing that's been done before. Like, don't put other people at risk in the process. So it was avoidable. So I want to shift gears off that negative topic there, and let me just share my screen here with you to make sure you've got some context of what's actually going on. So just make sure I've got the right screen there for you, so you can see the Google map there. So we're looking at the southern part of Ukraine. So if I just pull the map out here a little bit, so you can see Zaporizhzhia here, Kyiv just here, and the southern part of Ukraine there, where the river is on the southern part, that's the occupied territory. So Zaporizhzhia, you've heard of this. This is where the counteroffensive is going on. I'm not looking at the deep state map. I'm looking at Google Maps. And all of this part of the map, on the southern part of the map, on the bottom of the map where my mouse is in occupied territory. So if I zoom in just to where I'm here, this is the Zaporizhzhia power plant right here. And if I change the layer there, you can see that's what it looks like. So on the left-hand side, so on the western side of the power plant, you can see this big, looks like almost like a mini little harbor. Sometimes a harbor looks like that. But what this is the cooling pond for all of the used nuclear spent fuel rods. So this is the actual power plant itself. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6 generators that they have there. So it's said that Zelensky has come out and said that the Russians have mined the power plant itself. So what they're saying, so let me just give you the link so you can see that there. Zelensky says Russia is planning to sabotage the power plant. And just a couple of months ago, the IAEA, International Atomic Energy Agency, were in there, and they said that this was not mined. The outside area of it was mined. And they create minefields around these types of infrastructure there from a defensive position to make it really hard to assault those positions. Because it's a big area, there's no way that the military can cover all of these approaches. So what they do is they create minefields to stop the enemy advancing in those areas. So that's what the power plant looks like. That's where it's located. And if I just pull the map out a little bit further, you'll be able to see that the dam, the Kakhovka Dam, is just further upstream from where we are here. So if I kill the screen share there, and I've just got another video I want to share with you here, which really shows you exactly what's happened, and it's pretty quick before and after. So let me just play it again because you might have missed it. So that's the before. I'll pause it. That's what the cooling pond looked like before the dam blew, which is what Google Maps is showing us, and now that's what it looks like after. So it's quite different to what you can see. So there's now no more way for the water to get inside of that cooling pond. So they've said, the IAEA said that there's probably a month worth of water in there because the water evaporates because the fuel rods are hot. So there's natural evaporation that actually happens. And the cooling pond was continuously replenished from the river. But since there's no more water there to replenish that, that's now a problem. So what Zelensky is saying is that there's a potential for the Russians to sabotage this to create a massive nuclear disaster. All they would need to do is to blow the actual outside of that cooling pond. When you look at it, when you look at some other photos of it, it's not very big. It looks like a big place on the map, and it is a big area, but the pond that surrounds it is not very big. And it wouldn't take a lot to actually create a nuclear emergency. And I'm not saying a disaster, but an emergency. If they got rid of some of the top of the dam, I suppose, or the barrier that's holding the water in that cooling pond, and just let some of the water out to let some of the cooling rods to be exposed, then it would create a chain reaction that would cause all sorts of problems. So Zelensky's trying to get ahead of this because he's come out and said, hey, we've got new intelligence that shows the Russians actually blew the dam. There's drone footage going around of a car that's been parked on the Russian side of the dam, and it's full of explosives. And it's like, even if you put 10,000 kilos of explosive there, you're not going to blow up that dam. You're just not. The way explosives blow up, not down, and you're not going to blow the dam out. But they said that was part of the actual process of destroying the dam, and there's the smoking gun they're pointing at it, right? And it's like a car packed full of explosives, and you're like, dude, I can't even see the explosives. All I can see is the top of a car from a drone. And you want me to believe it? Like, I don't believe anything that you're saying. And now Zelensky's coming out and saying that the only way that the Russians can win this war is by creating an everlasting stalemate with a nuclear disaster. But I don't know, man. The boy that cried wolf, I just don't believe the guy. I don't believe him because the opposite would be true as well. If the Ukrainians went there and created a nuclear disaster, the Russians go, oh, well, we better stop while we fix that because that's going to affect us too. So the Russians benefit from it, so do the Ukrainians. So when you look at something like this, you say, well, who stands to benefit the most? That's the natural question to ask. Well, are the Russians going to benefit? Yes, they are, because they get to hold the ground that they've already got. Do the Ukrainians benefit? Yes, they do, because even though the Russians are holding the ground, they're not depleting their forces or their troops anymore, and it gives them an opportunity to reconstitute their forces and then go get rid of the Russians properly. But at what expense? At what price? A nuclear catastrophe? And if something really does go wrong there, and if you look at if you look at what's actually happened with the river and there's no more water there, it is a serious thing, and it's a serious possibility. And if there's only a month worth of water that can be in that cooling pond there, then what happens in a month's time, or in 2 months' time, or in 6 months' time? Is that cooling pond going to turn into a nuclear disaster? Or is that going to be something that is handled and managed at scale by the people that are looking after it? The thing that's come out and contradicted Zelensky is the International Atomic Energy Agency said the Russians didn't mine the cooling pond. They didn't. So whatever intelligence that you've got, that's not what we saw when we were on the ground. But then the Ukrainians go, oh, that's new intelligence. I'm like, I'm such a hard time believing anything any of these people say anymore, man. I just don't. All I see is catastrophe after catastrophe, disaster after disaster. And I look at my Telegram channel every day. I was trying to figure out what I was feeling yesterday as I was looking at it. And I'm looking, are there any stories there? Is anything worth reporting on? And when I saw this with Zelensky, this has been around for a couple of days now. It's probably 4 or 5 days now. And I thought, we should probably talk about this because it could be the biggest man-made disaster in human history if something goes wrong. It really could be. And Zelensky's trying to get ahead of it, saying that it's not us, we're not doing it. And I was trying to figure out how I felt about all of that. And after I'd finished, I stopped what I was doing and I started making dinner. I was making dinner and I was thinking, the feeling that I have is one of despair. And think about that. When was the last time you felt despair in your life? And I'm thinking, what does despair mean? It feels like hopeless, like I can't do anything. And these idiotic people are in charge, causing all of this misery onto the world, and they're elected. And then when they get elected, they claim to be good people trying to do the right thing, but they don't. All they do is create misery and despair and no hope for humanity. And my goodness, I hope, and I don't like to hope for anything because hope is not a strategy, right? You've got to take action to control your life and the things that you can control. But gosh, there's no chance that I can control anything to do with the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, for heaven's sake. So all I've got is hope. I hope that these idiots actually can work it out and it doesn't destroy that part of the world permanently with a nuclear disaster. It's just horrendous. Ed, I've been talking a bit there. What do you think, man?
Do you happen to know whether any of the landmines are stamped with made by BlackRock on them, or
All jokes aside, man, you got to wonder, eh? Like that's almost not funny, because they're the ones that stand to gain the
Yes.
most from these disasters. Not
Yes.
the Ukrainians, not the Russians, but those
That's right.
scumbags.
That's right. This is a money laundering operation. This whole war.
Just blow the dam, man. That'll cost $10 billion to build. We'll charge them 12. Yeah.
I mean,
We'll be there for the next 20 years rebuilding that dam. Yeah.
There you go. I mean, that's the lens that I filter all of my Ukraine-Russia war news through. Who is benefiting from this?
BlackRock and BRICS.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, I do not buy that Russia would want to damage that site for a couple of reasons. First of all, the prevailing winds in that part of the country go from west to east.
Mm-hmm.
So if
it'll all blow over Russia, not over Europe.
Right. That's right. So that's one reason. Another reason is, that's a valuable source of energy for them. If they have designs of taking over Ukraine someday, they're going to want that sucker to be intact.
They'll need it.
Yeah, they're going to need. So I don't. I mean, what do I know? But this, in my own layman's way of thinking about it, I don't think. I think Russia would not have an interest in destroying. Who is in control of that site at the moment? Is it Russia or is it?
Yeah, the Russians are in control of it.
Yeah. So I don't know why they would have designs on damaging it. The Ukrainian troops are right over the hill. We better blow this guy on our way out of town. I just don't see that.
It's strategically important, right? Because before the IAEA went in there at the start of the year or the end of last year, whenever it was, the Russians had moved all their equipment into it, and they made it a command and control center. Just like there's no chance that the Ukrainians are ever going to bomb it. And there was fighting around there. Remember, there was mortars and there was some artillery that was landing on the outside of the fence. Yep. And everyone's like, doesn't matter, you could crash a plane into that and it wouldn't do anything. It was like, well, we don't want to try that. Yeah. We don't want to hit it with a 155 round. Let's not try that. But there was fighting in and around that area. And then at one point, there was some Russian artillery pieces on the roof of some of those buildings there. And they're firing across the river at the Ukrainians, right? And they're like, haha, you can't hit us back. And it's like, well, we can take you out with a drone, right? We'll fly a drone into your face and make it happen like that. But look, it's a very strategic position for the Russians to hold.
Okay, well, this is my take on it, given just my amateur status here. Okay, I think this is a money-making operation, money-raising operation for Zelensky. He is going to be he's going to be revisiting this. He's going to go back to the circuit he was on a few months ago.
It's a red carpet coming up, man.
That's right.
In Milan.
Saying, this is why we need more money, because they're going after our nuclear power now. I think this is another shakedown by Zelensky. If you don't give us money, you're going to have nuclear fallout falling over Europe. So you better send us some more money. So it just feels like a shakedown operation to me.
He's trying to get ahead of it, right? So last year when they lost that part of Ukraine, and I remember the Russians said the Russians blew part of the dam, and they did, and then they fired HIMARS at the actual dam itself to stop heavy vehicles driving across the dam, because the Russians were coming across from south to north there with their tanks and their equipment and everything like that. And then they destabilized the bridge with HIMARS. And then at that time, they said, the Russians have rigged the dam to blow. And everyone's like, well, why would they rig the dam to blow, you dickhead? They're trying to use it to get across. You're the one actually firing at it and shooting it and blowing it up. No, the Russians have rigged the dam to blow. Like, I'm sorry, man. And Russia didn't blow up its own pipeline either. I watched just on that note, I watched a video on Twitter before. This guy's in like a town hall, and there's a bunch of politicians sitting on the stage. There's two of them, and he gets up and says, if Seymour Hersh is correct about the Russians not blowing up their own pipeline, why don't you investigate that properly and do something about it? Because if that actually happened, it's an act of terror against Russia and against Germany. And he's asking all of these really pointed questions, right, that any normal thinking person would ask. And the guy just dismisses him. And then as he gets dismissed, the fellow's asking the questions. He's going, why won't you answer the questions? Because if you don't answer the questions, we're going to all die in a nuclear war because of your decisions. And I don't want to die in a nuclear war. And then he's getting all upset, and someone takes the microphone off him, and the security guys are coming over, and he just pushes the guy out of the way, and he just talks, because it's in a town hall, right? So his voice is loud, and he's asking the same questions, and the people on stage are refusing to answer. And then some security guy comes along and throws him out. And it's like, why would that guy get thrown out for for asking questions, but you're saying he's disturbing this event? And all he's doing is asking for the answers. Why won't you tell us the truth? It was not the Russians that blew up that pipeline. I really highly doubt that the actual Russians blew up that dam. And I highly doubt that they're going to blow up the nuclear power plant as well. All of that just seems like bullshit to me. And I'm just wondering, like, that, and that's why I have that feeling of despair. Like, there's nothing you can do about any of it. Like, why pay attention to any of it? One day I'm going to wake up and find out that the power plant's been blown up and there's a nuclear disaster happening in Europe right now. It's like, what?
Well, look, none of this is in our control, right? It's all out of our hands. I was telling you early on, the last thing that I want is for Zelensky to be successful in making inroads to the Crimea, because even though, yeah, it might feel good that on moral grounds, oh yeah, they're getting their own territory back again, so they're justified. Hey, Putin. The truth is, Putin sees that as Russian soil, and and I think that's true with the Donbass region in general. If they are actually successful in reclaiming the Donbass, I don't think they will. I don't think they will be successful. But if they were, I think Putin considers that Russian territory, and he considers Crimea Russian territory. So basically, I don't want Ukraine to succeed in taking back the territory that, yes, they are righteous in their borders were, but we live in the real world here. We live in a nuclear age, and keep in mind that that European borders have been changing for centuries. So why are we making such a big deal about defending? Are we going to die in that hill, literally? Defending that little sliver of Ukraine? I still do not think Putin wants Ukraine. I don't think he wants the whole, shooting match, because if he took all of Ukraine all the way to Lviv, that puts him on the border with NATO. I think he wants Ukraine to be a buffer between NATO and him. So I think his idea of victory is that there's some kind of a puppet regime in place. He allows them to do what they're continuing to doing, but we just have kind of like a gentleman's agreement that you're going to be friendly with us.
Well, that's what the Minsk agreement was, and that was, we all know that was an entire ruse. I shot a video yesterday, I don't know if you saw it, Ed, about how Shoigu had come out. So Shoigu, if you don't know, is the boss of the Russian military. He came out and said, if the Ukrainians start using Storm Shadow attack amps, HIMARS, or long-range strike systems against Crimea, we'll consider that we're now at war with the US and the UK directly. So we know that Storm Shadow has been used pretty extensively in the last couple of weeks. Or at least we know the Ukrainians have told us that that's the case. And they came out just yesterday and said, we've had 100% mission success rate with this weapon system, against Crimea. So now are the Russians, because by that rationale, are the Russians now at war with the UK and the US? And so the reason I created that video is because here in Australia, we have this massive political discourse about something that just doesn't matter, doesn't create jobs or promote the economy or help our country move forward in any way, shape or form, called the voice to parliament. It's a giant waste of money, it's a giant waste of time, and it's a massive distraction from what's really going on as it relates to interest rates, as it relates to cost of living and all sorts of other things that affect everyday Australians. But what the media have failed to recognise is what Shoigu's saying, is that if we are now at war, if the US and the UK, or if the Russians have declared war on the US and the UK, then by association they've declared war on us. And we're talking about handing over the old M1 tanks that we have, the old F-18s that we have. We continue to supply the Ukrainians with equipment and with money. And all of a sudden, we're going to become a target for Russian attack. And the thing that we have in the middle of Australia is Pine Gap. And the Russians would easily take that chess piece off the table in the first day of the war. And now, all of a sudden, if the Russians declare war on the US and the UK, by association, NATO gets pulled in, and by association, Australia gets pulled in. So does that mean Australia is now at war with Russia? The answer is yes, because by association, we're going in there as Five Eyes collectively with NATO. We did that in Afghanistan. Why on earth was Australia in Afghanistan? What? That's because the Americans asked us to be there, and that's because it's a world's coalition on the war on terror, or some fucking bullshit that they make up. And the same will be true in Ukraine. But here's the rub, Ed. In the United States, you've got a giant military, man. In Australia, we don't. We've got 7 infantry battalions. And when you look at the casualty count of the Ukrainians and the Russians, and you compare that to the Australian army, even if we sent 2 battalions across there, we sent, say, 2,000 soldiers across there, and they went to the front and they were fighting, 2,000 soldiers will be scrubbed off the battlefield in a matter of weeks. Not because they're incompetent, but because it's a war of attrition. And then how are we going to replenish and reinforce that group of soldiers that are over there? Okay, we're going to send 2 more from here. Okay, so now we've sent 4 of the 7. There's only 3 left. What happens? Don't we need soldiers here to defend Australia in case something happens? Yes. Okay, we can't send any more. We've got the Army Reserve. Okay, cool. So we send all 7 battalions over there in the next 12 to 18 months. They all get chewed through, and we have an 80% attrition because of combat losses, because that's just how it's going in Ukraine for their side. And that's how it's going for the Russian side as well. What makes you think it's not going to happen to our side? So it happens to us. It leaves only one thing. The only way that the Australian army can reconstitute its forces is through conscription. It's the only way. That's the only thing that we have. That's the only lever that the government has to pull. The first lever they'll pull is the exact same lever that the Russians pulled. Hey, anybody that's had previous military service, you're required to turn up to your local Army Reserve branch, and they're in every second suburb in Australia. Go to the Army Reserve branch. You guys are going to the front. And then once that gets chewed through, it comes to where Zaporizhzhia, the Ukrainian commander of the military, said that wars are begun by soldiers, by professional soldiers. That's how wars begin. But the fighting ends with teachers and scientists. And what he's talking about is conscription, because there's no more soldiers left. They're all dead. And the only people left to go are the people that are left in the universities and professionals. And unfortunately, that's where we're at. But we're distracted here in Australia by the voice to Parliament, by some communist fucking wannabe dickhead that's written some wannabe constitutional change that doesn't affect anybody, that costs millions of dollars and does nothing for the country. But we're about to have war declared on us by Russia and become a nuclear target. This government is just completely out of control, man. And I had a bit more despair going on yesterday and thinking the only thing that I can do is shout that from the rooftops and tell people that that's actually what's going on. And the same is not true in America, because you have such a large military and you have such a large reserve force in your National Guard as well. So you guys will be okay. Even if you went over there and you lost 100,000 troops over there, it'll be okay. Here in Australia, that's just simply not the case, unfortunately.
Yeah, pardon me, I got a wasp in the house here.
Okay. Summertime problems in Minnesota.
Yeah. And I'm sweating, so it probably smells me and all the rest. Okay, so here's my amateur take on potential World War III coming, a shooting war. Okay, I can see China attacking Taiwan. In fact, I do think that they'll attack Taiwan sometime before the next election. I think they have to if they're going to do it. But aside from that, I can't imagine that either Russia or China would attack America or one of its allies, because that would open up a big can of whoop ass. And I think that they kind of know it. And they would be an instant pariah in the world, in the world court of public opinion. They'd be the bad guy real fast if they started a war with the West. But
do you think they care, though?
Huh?
The Russians don't care about that.
Well, I think they do. Listen, they don't have to start a shooting war with us. That's the idea behind this BRICS coalition. They're attacking us where it really hurts, economically. Okay, and China, the same thing. So if they can devalue, well, we're already devaluing our own fiat currencies. All Russia really has to do is sit back and watch, because we are
just wait.
right. We are doing a good job of taking down our own economic system. So, but if they want to speed it up, they do something like a BRICS, offer the world an alternative to the US dollar. So there are economic ways of taking down the West. So there's a way that China and Russia can take down the West without firing a shot. And you and I have said several times on this show that there has been an economic World War III going on for at least a couple of years now. So we talk about World War III. It doesn't necessarily have to be an actual shooting war. It can be, the economic war has already kicked in. It's already underway. So I think that Russia, in terms of population and GDP, they're tiny compared to America, right? We blow them away on every economic metrics and on every demographic metrics. However, Russia doesn't have the debt that we have, that they have to service. They're not afraid to pull oil out of the ground. They're a commodity-based country. They have actual traditional values that they hold on to. They've got a lot of things to brag about, I'll tell you. And so I can't see them attacking the West. And I think that Russia sees, well, I know that Russia sees the war with Ukraine as really a war with America. So, Putin was out just a couple of days ago in St. Petersburg on a speech, was sitting on stage saying that right now Ukraine is not fighting with any of their own weapons. They've gone through all of their own bullets. Right. They're fighting now. All the military assets come from outside.
And soon all of their troops will be gone too.
There you go. So he sees that, and he sees this as an American-backed war.
That's why I say, what you're describing is a war of attrition. They've got more gear than us. They can outlast us. That's longer. They can outsuffer us as well. And if Shoigu declares war on the UK and the United States directly, and something happens to escalate this to bring NATO in proper, the Aussies are coming with you as well. And that's what I'm saying is people don't think that this is going to come home to roost and affect you here in Australia. But World War II didn't just start when Germany invaded Poland. It started 18 months prior when they went into Austria and they went into Czechoslovakia. And there was a whole series of events leading up to that as well. And people just got short memories from that, or for whatever reason, they haven't studied history or they don't understand the lessons of history from the past. But we're in the same space now. So it's a scary, scary proposition. So my recommendation, ladies and gentlemen, is to make sure that you've got one eye on all of this stuff. So if something happens, you got to get some gold and silver, reduce your exposure to the banks and get some passive recurring income. And you got to have one eye on it, because you don't want to be surprised when these things come to pass, because you just go, oh, yeah, I kind of figured that was going to happen. I heard that somewhere before. Maybe you heard it here or you heard it somewhere else. But I think it's important that you pay attention to these things and keep one eye on it as well. Ed, as we wrap up the show, mate, have you got any closing remarks?
Yeah, please, if you haven't, please give us a like, because it really helps the algorithm. We really appreciate the support, and maybe hit that notification bell so you can catch us every day. We're on same time every day, same bat time, same bat channel. So we hope you, and please give us some comments, and God save the Queen.
God save the Queen. Don't forget to come and follow us as a podcast. Just pop over in your favorite podcasting app, folks. We're also available on Twitter and Telegram as well. And we've got a backup channel on Rumble. Just scroll down. All of the links are right there in the description. Ed, let's wrap it up. I'll see you tomorrow, mate. Same bat time.
Same bat channel.
How do we close it out again? God save the Queen.
Yeah.
Bye, everyone. See ya.